everyone. I hope you've had a fantastic day. I hope you have been able to tune into some of our live events. I hope you've been enjoying the video content. I know I enjoyed making it. My name is Ariel Hunter. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here, coming to you live from the Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve for our second annual open house, virtually done. We, of course, are open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for trail access Wednesday through Sunday, so make sure to get yourself out to the slough. But if you can't get out to the slough all day today, we have been bringing it to you. And tonight we are going to wrap up with a chat with a scientist talk with one of my favorite local scientists, Kat Beheshti. She is a California Sea Grant State Fellow. She got her PhD out here in Elkhorn Slough, maybe even waist and shoulder deep in mud. She knows so much about eelgrass and the eelgrass restoration out here, and she's going to be talking to you for about 15 minutes about some of the stuff that she does. If you have any questions you want our scientists to answer today, please put them in the comments and I will watch them and make sure to ask them for you. And if we can't answer them today, or you're watching a recording in the future, please feel free to add those questions in any ways. We will try to get the answers because we want to help you build your knowledge at all times. And with that, I turn it over to you, Kat. Please share with us what you have today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ariel. All right. So like Ariel said, I'm Kat Beheshti, and currently I'm a California Sea Grant State Fellow with the Ocean Protection Council's Climate Change Program, which is a whole mouthful, but it's a really cool fellowship opportunity where I get to work on statewide issues around sea level rise, habitat, specifically wetland, including salt marsh and seagrass restoration work, ocean acidification and hypoxia, and all of that really neat stuff that we're hearing about more and more, unfortunately, in the news. And so I'm really excited today to be here with all of you to talk to you about some of the work that I've been doing in Elkhorn Slough studying eelgrass. So really quickly, I just want to show this sea nettle that is really, quite beautiful. It's a little bit of a symbol of jellyfish kind of get like stigmatized as being a signal of a poor health environment, but that's not always the case. And these guys come seasonally into Elkhorn Slough in pretty high numbers sometimes. And this was one year where we got some pretty big guys in the estuary, which was pretty cool to be able to see. All right, so jumping right in. So I study eelgrass, which is a marine flowering plant. And this is what you're looking at right now. This is eelgrass, these long, oops, sorry about that. These long blades here. And eelgrass, like I said, is a marine flowering plant. It's also considered a foundation species. And what that means is it really builds the foundation upon which whole ecosystems are built. And so, of course, this is one of the reasons why it's very important to a lot of animals and, invertebrates and marine mammals and fishes. But selfishly, as humans, we also are always interested in why is it important to us. And so eelgrass provides a ton of ecosystem services, from providing habitat for species we like to eat, like Dungeness crab and red rock crab, to rockfish and cabezon and English sole and halibut and all of those good guys. Eelgrass provides a storm buffer to developed coastlines through wave attenuation or slowing of wave action, so it protects our coasts. And eelgrass also sequesters carbon, so it pulls and draws down carbon from the atmosphere that's absorbed in the water, and it also stores carbon in its sediment. Eelgrass also improves water clarity and water quality. I mean, it does pretty much everything, which is why it's such a cool species to study. And one of the things that I really like about eelgrass in particular is that in Elkhorn Slough, if you're ever kayaking or on one of the boat tours at like a medium to low tide, you can often see little critters living on the surface of the eelgrass. So it's a really important place to enjoy for recreational use. So kayakers, fishermen, all of these people love to enjoy the eelgrass beds of Elkhorn Slough. And so the problem though is that eelgrass in general needs our help. So eelgrass is actually the most common seagrass species at temperate latitudes, which includes us in California. And there are a lot of stressors that eelgrass has to deal with, from nutrient pollution to coastal development to issues due to dredging and all sorts of things like that. And then there's also climate impacts. So ocean warming, ocean acidification, hypoxia, all these things eelgrass has to contend with constantly. And so in Elkhorn Slough specifically, eelgrass must compete with really fast growing macroalgae. So I'm going to pause right here because I want to point a couple of things out. So these like sheets of green stuff you see are ulva. It's a macroalgae, okay? And so it grows in these huge, huge, huge sheets that can grow. I've dove in Elkhorn Slough when it is so thick. It's about, can you see, like this thick, super, super thick. So, okay, I'll tell you a story really quick. So it grows so thick that one time I was diving in Elkhorn Slough and I had just gotten a GoPro stick and it unclipped from my scuba gear and I never found it. Even though I knew exactly where it had dropped, the ulva was so thick that it just like just covered it all up and I could not find it. And I had my undergrads helping me. This stuff grows really thick. And so if you imagine you're just a little seagrass blade like this one right here, and you're trying to grow through these huge, thick macroalgal mats of algae, trying to reach for the sun and get some sunlight so you can photosynthesize, because again, these are marine flowering plants, they need light. And eelgrass in particular needs a lot of light. And so you can imagine there is huge competition here for space. And this algae is way faster at growing than seagrass is. And so I'm going to show you what it can sometimes look like in Elkhorn Slough with all this algae and just a little shoot of eelgrass here and a little shoot of eelgrass there. I particularly like this video because it's so rare that you're getting video in Elkhorn Slough and you can see a fish. So if you saw a fish in the background there, that was likely a surf perch, and we're going to see it probably one more time. Right there. See? I love this video because of that fish. And so you can see, look at how much algae is growing. And then also some of it is floating over onto the eelgrass. And so what can happen is that the macroalgae can actually smother the eelgrass. So this is a problem in Elkhorn Slough in particular because it's a pretty nutrient loaded estuary. And that's also primarily due to where it is situated, surrounded by agricultural land and at one of the most productive upwelling centers along the California coast. So there's a lot of nutrients in the system. And so one of the ways in which we can help eelgrass rebound, because in Elkhorn Slough, we're still recovering from about a 10-hectare deficit of what we had historically in the estuary pre-development. And so one way we can do this and help push the system a little bit towards where it was prior to our impacts is by conducting restoration work. And so in Elkhorn Slough, when we restore eelgrass, it's really like underwater gardening. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that and what that looks like. This is not the best video, but I wanted to play a game since when I have my booths at the Elkhorn Slough open house, usually we have a whole bunch of games and it's very interactive and really fun. And so I'm assuming that if any of you are tuning in right now, then you know the slough really well. To be listening to me talk about Elkhorn Slough on a Saturday at 5 o'clock, you must love Elkhorn. And so I have a question for you. This is a place in Elkhorn Slough. Here are your clues. It is very sandy, as you can see here. The water is generally quite clear for Elkhorn Slough. And so I'm curious if any of you have guesses on where this is in Elkhorn Slough. Pretty clear water and sandy sediment. And so if you put it in the chat, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I just thought that might be a fun little guessing game since we can't play our normal games that we play in person. All right, so there are many ways to restore eelgrass. the way that we have restored eelgrass in Elkhorn Slough is using what's called the garden staple method. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like here. This is me working with my project collaborator, Brent Hughes, who also did his dissertation or his PhD at Elkhorn Slough and is now at Sonoma State. And Brent is preparing the eelgrass shoots for me and handing them off to me, and I'm placing them in the ground. So really, I'm telling you, underwater gardening. So we go to the largest, most healthy and robust bed or meadow in Elkhorn Slough called Seal Bend, and we harvest eelgrass to then transplant into areas where it was historically, but isn't currently or never was previously. And so first step, harvest. Second step, get all your dive gear and find where you're going to restore. Third step, you grab a hand trowel, which is what you have in probably your garden shed. It's just the little handheld shovel. And here he is handing me a garden staple and you can't see, let me use my cursor. And a garden staple, and then here's the hand trowel, and I'm placing it in the ground here. And so you just do that for the entire plot area, and that's how you do it. That's that. And then you do that over a pretty small area and you just wait. And then after that, your only job then is to just smile, because you're making our coast more productive and healthy by adding in this critical foundation species into an area that it probably once was, but isn't currently. And so one of the things that I really love about eelgrass restoration is that you're building habitat that is used by important species. And so this is not necessarily high tide. This is sort of a medium tide height, because you can see the eelgrass still popping up. But I was so excited to see this, because here is one of our eelgrass restoration plots. And so I didn't mention this before, but our initial plot sizes were about 50 by 50 centimeters. So it's quite small. And now they've grown in a lot of places to huge, huge plots, or I would call small meadows. And so this is one of our posts. If you're ever in Elkhorn Slough and you see PVC posts that look like this, that are on this either side of the channel, the main channel, that marks one of our eelgrass restoration plots. And so you can go and kayak over there and be like, whoa, this is part of the restoration. That's super cool. And just know that some of these plots were really small and now just kind of really embrace the fact that they've expanded tremendously. So much so that now sea otters are using them to rest in. So this otter is in one of our restoration plots, resting in the eelgrass meadow. I mean, this is, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is pretty cool. So we are building habitat for otters to use for resting, and just couldn't be happier about the outcome of this work. So I'm just going to let us enjoy the fact that there's that otter just using our plot. How neat. All right. But animals are also using eelgrass at low tide. So here's this awesome video of some eelgrass, the Seal Bend meadow at low tide. And you can see tons of birds using the meadow. And so when it's exposed, egrets, herons, seagulls, godwits, curlews, all these shorebirds that you often see in Elkhorn Slough are found eating inside the bed. And if anyone can guess, we'll do another guessing game of what this little guy is right here. This is one of my Elkhorn Slough favorites, but here, I'll play it one more time. It's not too much of a giveaway by playing it more because it's so far away. But if you have any guess to what this is, I'm curious. This will be for the real hardcore Elkhorn Slough fans. So let me just move on. I want to show you one more video of animals frolicking and foraging in and around eelgrass. So this is one of those times where you've got a nice intersection of tons of birds flying around and diving into the eelgrass bed, and then a ton of otters resting, playing, and foraging in the eelgrass meadow. So when I was out here this one day in Elkhorn Slough, I saw otters playing like crazy. They were having so much fun going in and out of the eelgrass bed. It was quite cute. And so this is another neat example of all the animals that use eelgrass, especially our important keystone species like the sea otter. And so going back to what my question was earlier about where we were in that one video, do we have any guesses, Ariel?
We did. So folks were guessing somewhere near the opening to Moss Landing Harbor. I was actually thinking it was on the other side of that opening though. So I was in the wrong spot.
That's exactly right. That video was taken at Vieira's, which is on the opposite side of where this video was taken. And so right at the mouth, right at the opening, that's where you get that really clear marine, heavily marine influenced water that's typically less turbid, and you have really fast moving water right at the mouth. And that's why you have more sand, because those coarser particulates or those coarser sediment particles settle out, whereas the more fine stuff just continues to be resuspended as it moves across the slough as the tide's coming in and as the tide's going out. So much sandier, much clearer water. Sometimes it's the Caribbean out there. It's so clear. Over at Vieira's, it's one of my favorite spots to dive. Yep, perfect, great job. All right, so I really just couldn't get enough of this otter that was using our plot. So this is a photo of that same otter using our eelgrass restoration plot from 2015, just a couple weeks ago. So this is pretty awesome to see these really important animals using the habitat. And like I said, there's a ton of other animals that use these eelgrass meadows. And so I want to show you guys next. That's right. So next I'm going to show you a photo. So when we conducted the restoration work in Elkhorn Slough, we also monitored species diversity and abundance. And I'm going to show you a photo now that shows a collage of not all, but a lot of the species of fishes and invertebrates that we caught when we were doing this work. So all the animals we caught, we just sized them, identified them, and released them back into the estuary where they were initially trapped. But I just think this is a really cool collage because it really drives home the point that these beds are really instrumental in supporting a high degree of biodiversity inside of them. And so, you know, it just kind of shows how important this habitat really, really is. Okay, so before we go into question and answer time, I want to show you guys one more video that is more of a story. So when we go and monitor our restoration plots, one of the data points we get is plot area, because we're interested in how much our plots are expanding over time. And so how we do that is we put a transect tape, which is basically a measuring tape, on one point at the end of the bed or the plot, and then we are scuba diving. And so then we're diving and we're letting that rope extend, and then we're measuring how long it is one way and how long it is another way. And that's how we measure plot area. So you're on the edge of the plot the entire time. So I was diving along the edge of the plot, and, you know, diving in Elkhorn Slough, it's one of my favorite places to dive, but it's not that glamorous. And sometimes you really can't see very well. And so this was one of those times where I couldn't see very well. And I saw a shadow and I got so scared. And what it ended up being, of course, my first thought is like shark. And most, like any of the sharks that you're going to find in Elkhorn Slough are not dangerous, and most sharks are not dangerous. But of course, I was like, you know, all of my science training went out the door, and I was immediately scared. And it ended up being a 4-foot-ish long thornback ray, which was super cool. So this isn't the best video, and that kind of, but that's sort of my point, is that I could barely see. And then I basically ran into this thing. And it was beautiful and very, very cool, right on the edge of the plot. So who knows? I'd like to think that, you know, crabs are often in our restoration plots, and this guy was just waiting for a crab to just mosey on out, and then he was going to eat them. Who knows? So this was one of those really cool encounters that you often see while diving in Elkhorn Slough, if you can see. So this is like one of my favorite videos. And so before we go into question and answer, I just want to end by saying that one of the most rewarding things I have been able to do as a scientist is restore eelgrass in Elkhorn Slough. And that's because it's an incredible experience planting a foundation species and then watching, quite literally watching the community build as that restored plot that you planted only 20 shoots in 5 years ago becomes a meadow, and now otters are foraging and resting inside of it. And so it is really, really neat. And I encourage all of you to, next time you're visiting Elkhorn Slough, pay attention to those poles, kayak around them, look inside, see if you see anything cool, because this is a really, really unusual success story of eelgrass restoration. We've been tremendously successful in restoring eelgrass in this particular estuary. And so it's something to really make sure to pay attention to and to visit if you have the chance. And so now I am happy to just jump right in and answer any questions you might have. And I'll definitely, for those of you that watch this afterwards, I will definitely sign on to Facebook and try and answer questions after the fact. And so while we do some question and answer, I'll just leave you with this really cool photo of a sea hare. This is the Taylor sea hare. And this was the biggest one I've ever seen. So 3 fingers wide. I mean, this thing was huge. And then the other day I was in Elkhorn Slough, and we were looking at some of the seagrass out there near Vieira's, and I saw another nudibranch, the Spanish shawl. I think this is the Spanish shawl. Ooh, maybe it's not. I'll confirm in the comments, but it's some nudibranch that's awesome, or maybe Ariel knows. And I accidentally, when I was trying to take a picture of it on the eelgrass, I accidentally dislodged it from the eelgrass. And then, guys, it took its foot and it's attached itself to the top of the water and was gliding on the top of the water. That's so cool. So always surprised, always mesmerized by Elkhorn Slough. And I hope you guys are now too after watching the talk. And I'm happy to answer any questions.